This happened a few months ago to my boyfriend and I. So my boyfriend Trevor and I are major stoners, and we also live in a very crime-riddled city. The kind that you never walk alone at night in, and you lock your doors even if you'll be in and out of the store in 5 minutes. That being said, we were cruising around in Trevor's car one day that we both had off. We got something to eat and then decided that we wanted to smoke a bowl in the car while we ate. There's a large building that went out of business months ago right next to where we got our food. We've actually parked behind the building a few times before to smoke, so it felt safe to us. Trevor and I pulled into this weird parking spot behind the building. It's got lines for parking, but it's the only spot back there. He parked backwards so we could look out the windshield still. To the left, the road goes behind the building and you can get back into the parking lot and are right by an exit once you reach the end. To the right, you can go 2 ways. Slightly left to get into the parking lot and slightly right to get into a side street that takes you to a main road. You can also see around the building on the right side and look into the parking lot. And behind us are trees lining a wall behind us, so we've got a view of everything. And Trevor and I settled in, packed a bowl and started eating. We were there for a good 20 minutes when I saw an older red SUV slowly swing around the building from the parking lot on the right side. I didn't think anything of it. Cars pass behind there sometimes as a shortcut. We packed another bowl after we had finished our food and we were just chatting. After about another 5 minutes, the red SUV comes back, driving slowly again. My stomach kind of clenches up, and I mentioned that this is the second time that it passed us. Trevor stared at the back of the SUV as it headed to the exit at the end of the building. They're probably thirsting for this spot, Trevor said after the car was out of sight. My circle and my smoking spots have someone else in them. But what if it's something bad? I said, half joking, half serious. It had tinted windows so I couldn't tell that there were people in there looking at us. He reassured me that it was okay and took another hit before passing it to me. We had spent a good amount of time in that spot before without anything happening, so I relaxed for the moment. 15 minutes passed and the car hadn't shown back up, so I decided Trevor was right. I was looking down on my phone when Trevor took an enormous hit, one that made him start coughing like mad. While my sight was still down, I saw a dark car slowly creep into my peripheral vision. I looked up and there was a black sedan that was driving directly in front of our car. They were moving so slowly that they were basically stopped in front of us for a moment. Their windows were also tinted but less than the SUV's. I could see 2 male figures in the front, and after 2 seconds of me staring at them, they rolled to the left as if they were headed to the end of the building. Trevor was still in the middle of his coughing fit. His forehead had pressed against the steering wheel, so he didn't see them roll up or hover in front of us. For a second, I thought they were undercover cops, but I see one of their taillights are out, and I know that's not the case. I'm silent as I watch the sedan. They were driving just too slow. And then it starts to flip around, and I know that things are not okay. We should go, I said firmly over his coughing that were still going strong. Trevor looked up and around us. His eyes were really watery. He tried to ask why, and then he saw the black sedan coming towards us, after they had finished flipping it. They stopped about 15 feet from us with their car turned diagonally, so there was no room for us to drive past them. And Trevor reached for his seatbelt with one hand, and the moment that he wrapped his fingers around it, we heard the roar of another car's engine even over his coughing. At the end of the parking lot, I see the red SUV speeding our way. "Let's go, now." I yelled something like that as they whipped around the corner of the building. Trevor dropped the seatbelt and immediately started the car. We peeled out of the parking spot and started towards the rightmost exit to take us onto the side street. The SUV was turning to block both exits and we barely made it past them. It was so close I'm surprised Trevor's car didn't get some kind of scratch on it. As we passed the SUV, I saw that all the windows were half down. There were 4 men in the car, every single one of them staring directly at us, their heads turning as we squeezed past them. We were going 40 down the side street, and it wraps around the parking lot, and we were worried that they would cut us off at a different exit that leads into this road. We watched the SUV turn around and start speeding along the parking lot that ran along with the side road. And we were forced to stop at the stop sign at the end of the road due to traffic on the main road, but they didn't follow us after that. I saw the sedan and the SUV meet in the middle of the parking lot before we finally were able to turn onto the main road. We took a very confusing route home in case they did decide to tail us. I don't know what would have happened if they had trapped us in, but I don't think they were just trying to scare us away. I'm happy that I'm not living in the timeline where we weren't fast enough to get out. For a few months after this incident, we would drive past the lot, simply because it's along that main road we take all the time, and that red SUV would be there sometimes. Sometimes late at night and other times during the day. Even if we hadn't seen them there again, we would still never go back. Back in 2015, I was working as a live-in home health aide for a wealthy family. It was just me and my patient living in a very nice condo in a quiet neighborhood on a golf course. We were the youngest people who lived there. I was 27 at the time. My patient was a 21-year-old male with Asperger's, SPD, and BPD, and some substance abuse problems. He had recently gotten into some trouble and been legally declared incompetent. We'll call him Jake. Jake was a nice kid, but had severe emotional issues and almost no social awareness, compounded by the refusal to take prescribed medication, which worked incredibly well when he took it, and drug abuse. He was taken advantage of a lot because of the crowd that he hung around with. Right before I moved in, 6 friends came to hang out with Jake one day, and ended up staying for 2 weeks, draining Jake's bank account on various drugs, meth, coke, MDMA, weed, and they absolutely trashed the condo. Jake was lonely and he never said no to people. He wanted them to like him. Honestly, I think Jake was only 14 or 15 years old mentally. I think he turned to drugs to deal with depression and anxiety, and also to fit in with the people around him. He's much better now. All in all, it was a sweet gig. I was paid very well, lived in a nice condo rent-free, and basically just had to keep the place clean, keep food in the fridge, and make sure that he took his medication. When I moved in, my boss, Jake's mom, warned me about a girl who occasionally stayed with her father, who was our downstairs neighbor. She told me that the girl was named Amber and that she looked younger, but she was 37 years old, tall, blonde, and very thin. She was right too, she looked much younger, like 25. She said that Amber didn't have a car or a job, and that she was an addict that liked to use Jake. Amber's father had custody of her 2 children, and she would come visit the kids and stay for a few days a week. She said that one day Amber asked to borrow Jake's car for an hour, and ended up running off with it for 2 weeks. Amber was also the one who had introduced Jake to these 6 friends, who would trash the place. She was bad news and was never to be allowed in the condo. She wanted me to call her immediately if Amber had stopped by, or Jake went anywhere with her. After the theft, she put a GPS on Jake's car, and allegedly she could stop the engine remotely. My boss made it clear that she didn't expect me to be a security guard, just to notify her of things that were going on. Leading up to this event, I had a few run-ins with Amber where I had to politely tell her that she wasn't allowed to come into the apartment. Jake could not take her to the store or anywhere, and no Jake couldn't go to a party at her boyfriend's house, etc. Amber was always spaced out, like she talked slow and seemed wide-eyed and off. She explained to me that she had been hit by a car while riding a bike recently, and complained that she was the one who ended up going to jail. I was like, how? Well, apparently she takes a lot of Xanax and was under the influence, so I think that explains the spaced out part. Anyway, she was never aggressive, but it was clear that she didn't like me and often would say things like, Jake's his own person, he's a 21-year-old man. He doesn't need permission. And whenever she spoke to Jake, when we saw her at the gym or in the parking lot, she would be whispering to him, No doubt trying to manipulate him into giving her money or something. Anyway, on to the incident. Jake was out of state with his father, giving me a mini vacation. My best friend was staying over to spend a few days with me, and we were drinking PBR and watching RuPaul's The Drag Race. It's like 11 p.m. and we hear a light knock at the door. I go investigate through the peephole and I see that it's Amber. I ignore her. She knocks louder about 30 seconds later. I watched her leave through the peephole and I sit back down, telling my friend the situation. 5 minutes go by and she's back. This time she's pounding on the door like a cop. I'm getting mad because I'm off work and I don't want to deal with her crazy, especially when my friend is over. So I say nothing and I go back to the couch. She knocks like a normal person and starts saying, "Hello, Jake, I need help." I still don't answer. And then I hear her try to open the door. It's locked. Always, I'm a habitual door locker. And this enrages her or something and she starts screaming and pounding on the door nonstop. I get up and I look through the peephole again and she looks like a demon. Her pupils were huge, so I thought that she was on something. She looked crazed. Her hair was tangled and wild and she was sweaty and angry. Looking back, I'll never forget those wide pupils looking at me through an evil glare. I ask her through the door what she wants, and she said that she needs to speak to Jake right now. He owes her money and she needs a ride to her boyfriend's house right now. I tell her that Jake isn't home, and then she asks me if I'll take her, and I tell her no. I'd been drinking and I'm going to bed. She let out a frustrated scream, punched the door and left. My friend and I went to bed shortly after, and we didn't hear from her again after that. The next morning, we're getting ready to leave to go to breakfast. I hear a knock like a policeman's knock at the door, you know the sound. I look through the peephole expecting to see Amber, but this time it's an actual cop. I open my door and can see my parking lot is full of police, and there's a van marked crime scene unit and an ambulance. I honestly assumed that Amber had OD'd or something. The cop wants to ask me if I heard anything strange last night, and I tell him about the encounter with Amber and asked if she's okay. He tells me that she's in custody for the murder of her father. Does Jake own a crossbow and is it missing? Yes and yes. It had been missing for weeks. He said that I would need to speak to some detectives at the station. So, I don't know if she came to my door before or after she had murdered her father with a freaking crossbow. Like is she Tyrion Lannister or something? But the detective told me that this theory was that she was an addict and she was withdrawing and needed to get to her boyfriend's for more dope. She tried to get Jake to drive her, and when that didn't work, she asked her father, who refused. And this is what went down. They argued, other neighbors heard that. She killed him with the stolen crossbow and stole his truck. She only got a mile away before she was signaled to pull over. She led the cops in a high-speed chase over the span of 2 counties before she finally lost control and crashed. The cops were only pulling her over on suspicion of drunk driving, but when they went to speak to her, she told them that she was speeding because she needed to check on her dad. She thought that somebody had stabbed him. They asked her why she thought that, and she wouldn't answer. They sent police for a welfare check and they found him before her sons did. So yeah, that was the time my crazy, drug addict neighbor murdered her father with my patient's crossbow. Legit crazy stuff. One time, I went to the bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to many bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said that her name was Candace, and I noticed that she had really bright red hair. I assumed she had dyed it. It was pretty but unnatural. Anyways, this girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already very drunk, and to be honest, I played along like I was drunk already too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was just trying to get free drinks, so I told her that we didn't have any money. She offered to buy us drinks instead. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend went to the bathroom, and before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers. He was obviously too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it that he could barely answer her. I told her that he was too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea what happened. But Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him, but I told her no because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than him and he was my responsibility. I told her the only way that he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed she thought that I was jealous or just blocking, but my friend could barely stand and lost interest in Candace already at that point. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home, and said that we could go back to her place alone. At this point, I had had a few drinks and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way to her car. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held onto my arm. "Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. Everything was happening too easy for me, so I felt pretty weird. We got in a car and we drove down the street. "You want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it so you don't have to worry about paying," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and I wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look stupid when I'm drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace more than I already did earlier, with telling her my friend was too drunk. I told her that I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to give me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. She went in the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed that she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth instead of a pint. On the car ride, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips, but she kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice, and pretended to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor in the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know that I was acting drunker than I was. She actually believed I was a sloppy drunk when I was simply buzzed. I took a couple more sips of liquor and finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her. She didn't react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she lied to me about her name initially. We drove up to her house and I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked, and we walked in her house. She closed her front door and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but assumed she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had used the bathroom, and I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. It felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing that bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise, and I made myself puke up the liquor that I drank. I flushed and went to the sink and started drinking the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be too drunk, but still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I wanted to pretend to be drunk. I turned the sink off and I could hear her talking to someone. "Yeah, he's really drunk. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who was she talking to and do what? I walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. The moment that I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head. That strange, very bright red hair go into another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me. "Let's go in my room," she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with the same hair. And that's when I realized it was another girl with the same wig on. It was a wig the whole time. She had changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped. but I tried to look like I had no idea that it was a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her that I just needed to use the bathroom one more time and told her sorry I was so drunk. She told me that it was fine, but just to hurry up. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whisper something to someone again, but this time I thought that I heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it and ran faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't look behind myself or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, ran through someone else's backyard, hit a road and ran toward the main road. I kept running down the main road until I saw a 24-hour convenience store, and I ran into the store and stood straight at the front of the store in front of the camera. I called a taxi and I went home. I tried to think what happened that night. What was she or they planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friends a cab. And mostly, why was she wearing a wig that she gave to another girl to wear? Who was she talking to, and what did it mean? And what was in that room that they tried to lure me into? The next day after this incident, I went back to the house with a couple of friends to see just what was going on. Nobody was there, no cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it for only that night and never came back.